Happy Monday. It's Monday afternoon coffee with myself, Joe Lamb, and this is Dr. Michael Stone. He's coming to you from Ashland, Oregon, and I'm coming to you from Gig Harbor, Washington. Welcome everybody. I hope everybody had a good weekend, a nice holiday. We've had several to celebrate recently. A time to look inward and a time to think about looking outward. How was your weekend, Dr. Stone?
It was great. I think in honor of where we are in spring and in honor, a different coffee mug for every mood. If I have 30 different coffee mugs, what does that say about my moods? But if you notice, this is from Remix. I think all of us are asked to, boy, if this last year and a half has done anything, it's encouraged us to remix our priorities and remix our life. It was a good weekend.
Good. It was hard to read what your coffee mug said.
It says Remix.
Okay.
It's a remix. It's a Remix coffee bar. So if you're ever in Ashland, they do a very nice job. Local beanery.
That's nice. That's a cool call out. That's a cool call out. Tell me about what you've been thinking about today in the news that's come out over the weekend and everything.
Well, there are a few things. One, I think this, this last weekend, it's very contemplative and in our traditions. And I always think about, I spent quite a bit of time thinking about how I've responded personally and professionally to the pandemic. Learn new things about myself, learn new securities and insecurities about it. And I think that we also learned a lot about helping understand people's anxieties and all the things that have happened in their life. I mean, if we ask each other the question of what things has the pandemic taught you, and take the time to listen, even if it's through the mask, we'll understand a little more of the human experience, because everyone has been affected. And even as you were talking about, Joe, earlier, how as the public begins to open up just a little bit, if we're when we walk around in masks, we often lose a huge amount of our communication with fellow humans because they can't see our facial expressions.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I think, it's an interesting one as we get out in the world. After not being out in the world, it's like a whole change. Like you can have a deep conversation here on, Facebook Live on Monday afternoons, but you're not having, as you've got your Remix coffee mug, but it's not like you're bumping into somebody and having a conversation with random people at your coffee shop that you go to. I got a haircut today, and it was kind of interesting to have someone pipe up who was sitting there because she had brought an elderly gentleman in, and she was, probably in her 40s or her 50s, and she contributed to the conversation I was having with the woman who cut my hair. And it was kind of, oh my goodness, here we are, spending this time talking with people I didn't know 20 minutes ago. And that was a really new experience since we don't have many of those.
Yeah, that's exactly true. And I think that, we were able to spend a little time with my 86, almost 87-year-old mother and stepfather, unmasked because we were all vaccinated, and we actually sat and spoke at a table over dinner, and to be able to hug your mother, that there were times during the last year and a half where, with other people getting sick in the family, you didn't know whether that was going to happen again.
Yeah.
And you didn't approach a hug with a warmth and caring as much as I shouldn't even think about hugging, because what if I were to put you at risk?
Right.
And it's changed our human experience. It's changed our human experience so much. It's changed our science experience. Today I heard about so much is done by news release, right? So today, in the New York Times, there was a whole piece on the HDVH in the NDVHXPS vaccine, which, I heard about it by press release and a very well-written article in the New York Times, and it's going to be produced in chicken eggs, much like the influenza vaccines were. And they're trialing it in Thailand and Brazil. And they figured out a way to stop the spike protein from morphing from a tulip shaped to a spike shape by injecting 6 prolines into the vaccination. Injects 6 prolines, and so it stops the shape shifting of the spike protein. And I mean, everything is so rapid, and so much of our science has been by news release. It's been swivel necking for me.
Yeah. Do you remember the CAST trial that came out in spring of '89? Cardiac arrhythmia suppression trial?
Yes.
The Denver VA hospital cardiology group was one of the major centers for doing that. And we had a catchment area of 5 states for the Denver VA cardiology clinic. And I was on call starting Friday afternoon, and telephones started ringing because at 1 o'clock, the CAST safety committee, in a 4 o'clock in the afternoon press release on the West Coast, released a press announcement that they had an article in Monday's upcoming New England Journal about the early results of the trial, and that the trial was being discontinued because it was killing more people than it helped.
It's never the trial you want to be part of.
Right. And I spent the weekend trying to get records out of the VA medical records department to try to figure out if patients were put on flecainide and enconide for cardiac arrhythmia issues, or if they had been put on it because they were enrolled in the study and they actually had fairly benign arrhythmias, like PVCs post cardiac arrest. And the person at our center who had access to the locked cabinet that could have told me all that information had gone skiing, and that was pre-cell phone days. So finding out about things by press release left an indelible impression upon me back then. And, but we're stuck in the middle of it right now because, by the time things are published, and due to the failure of having a true website, it astounds me that the CDC doesn't have a website of recent postings and recent kind of curated, hey, come here, doctor, read these journal articles. These are the key ones you should be reading this week. The fact that that's never been created is just mind-boggling to me. But you're right. I mean, we're learning something new each day. Yesterday I was looking at Apple News press releases saying the fourth surge is here, and then I saw an Apple press release this morning that Sunday's numbers are smaller, so maybe it's not here.
Yeah. Exactly.
Or how the fourth surge differs. Before we get to talking about that, I just wanted to circle back to the little thing that I posted in terms of having deeper conversations. I think our opportunity is to jump in where people have been talking. And what I posted there is something that Feathered Pipe has been doing. And I had the privilege of getting to do it the previous Saturday, which is spend nearly an hour just talking about the role really of spirit in functional medicine. And they asked me some great questions in kind of a structured interview. And I thought people might be interested in catching that. And the website that's listed there is the opportunity to go and find that. So,
and that dovetails in a bit to. So, Joe, this has been a very prolonged Monday afternoon coffee break. When did we start doing this?
I think we've passed our anniversary.
I think so too. Was it
March of last year?
Yeah, February or March of last year. Well,
yeah.
And we've talked all around a lot of aspects of human condition. We've talked about how fear, how giving, how caring, how appreciation, how gratitude influences our brain chemistry and restructures many of our reflexes. We've talked a lot about COVID. We've talked about hormones, androgens, estrogens. We've chatted about immune responses. We've shared quite a bit around this virtual cooler. And I think that since everybody has been changed from this last year and a half, it may be time for us, if we haven't spent a lot of time reflecting even more on what are the things that have sifted out of your life, what are the things that have sifted in, and maybe the challenge between now and next week is that we put this last experience. You talked about the spiritual aspects in functional medicine, their lifestyle aspects in functional medicine. How's it affected our timeline and our health, or our perspective of being? Not human doing, but human being. How has it affected that? And I know we get to spend some time talking about that on the 24th on a Facebook Live, 90-minute Facebook Live of April. And what else do we have coming forward?
Yeah, well, we've got that Facebook Live that we're doing Saturday morning, the 24th of April at 9 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, is entitled 90 Minutes of Recreation. and visioning. And it goes exactly to what you're saying, how do we reauthor the myth that we live by? Or perhaps we might want to say reauthorize the myth by which we live. And a lot of us do that blindly. We don't really know what the story is that's resonating, that we're living to. We're not necessarily writing the plot of our own movies. We're kind of directorless. In some ways, we're kind of a stream of consciousness buffeted by everything that's going on around us, by the monkeys chattering in the tree in our mind, kind of. And, the timeline that you're talking about is one of the tools we're going to explore that day, of building the timeline of the major events in your life and then tying it to something called the genogram, which is drawing like a family tree and seeing the importance of relationships and seeing the importance of health concerns and all of that, and seeing how that all connects out, and getting a sense of, this is who I am. Does it resonate? And how do you pull that forward?
No, that's yeah, we look forward to that. I think it's just a great opportunity to maybe springboard into some different aspects of you this spring.
Sorry. You still there, Michael?
Yeah. Yes, I am.
I made the mistake of trying to figure out when our first Monday afternoon coffee break was, and it started playing. It was the 30th of March.
Well, there you go. We have passed the one year anniversary. I
right.
recollect that it was the 16th of March was when we really became pandemic awake in our clinic. That's when we had 38 out of 43 clinic appointments canceled that day. And it became very clear that we were going to have to restructure how and what we did to help people out, And I think you and Pierce County was initially had a lot more lockdown and restrictions than we were down here in Ashland. And it was just a dynamic time,
It was. We were doing everything virtual by that point. I'm looking at where I was sitting. I can see the images. And I think you were in the Grow Baby office, and I was in my dining room, my kitchen at home. So we were all walked out of the office. But timeline, you were kind of one of the creators of the original Matrix, at Functional Medicine Matrix. You're credited with writing it on a cocktail napkin at dinner one night and doing that piece. When did the timeline as a functional medicine tool get started?
Well, the just a little bit on there's the myth of the Matrix, and I'll just say that I sketched that out in one of the early AFMCPs when I was sitting next to David Jones, the first president of IFM, and trying to figure out how to listen to a case, listen to a story, and begin to think systems wide. And so he saw that late in the morning and actually took it upstairs in the Holiday Inn that we were staying in and typed it out in as I drew it with some different components, brought it down and handed it out and asked everybody to listen to the case presentations utilizing this tool, because we needed a tool to change us from linear thinking to more of a matrix or network thinking. And that was the beginning. And then that was developed with more specificity and trying different combination of things over the next number of years by IFM and IFM faculty. A couple of years after that, we were having trouble getting from the patient's story to the matrix. And it really then drew on Sidney Baker, who used a very extensive timeline when he took his story. Sidney Baker and Bethany Hayes and Robert Roundtree, and we ended up having a retreat, IFM faculty retreat, for only concentrating on how do we listen to the timeline and begin to see, how do we listen to the story and then begin to see the patterns that then allow us to see the system's connections. And so that was really in New Hampshire a couple years later. So that was in the mid 2000s, I believe. And it really allowed people to really just begin to listen and mile mark key aspects that the clinician could begin to see the patterns. And then the obvious thing is through Living Matrix and Priya Kamani, she ended up developing a way that the things could be done online so that it presents the timeline and the matrix, if you wish, to the provider. So, and then people are trying to work it so that how do you make it so that the clinician can see you and the information that is shared about you and your timeline, how can it be out there almost on the table so that you can have a discussion so I and you can hear what is most important and driving the health or the disease, if you wish, the imbalance of the patient, of the person who's come to see you, to help them understand the things that they can do to improve their health. And that's really many aspects of that is what you're so brilliantly have led in the Lifehouse Project, and all of our involvement in that is really a journey of how we connect better with our fellow humans and see patterns that all of us can learn from and help each other with.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is, during a functional medicine visit, a practitioner respects that timeline. They ask the question, like you pointed out today, when was the last time you remember being well? They ask, they look at kind of the antecedents, triggers, and mediators model that, Leo Gallen came up with, mediators being the imbalances, the physiologic imbalances that create a disturbed pattern of physiology, so you can't recover from a trigger being some sort of unique insult. And I think one of the things that you and I have really looked at coming out of our work with Lifehouse is if behavior in some way represents kind of the outward expression of kind of our inward integration of mind, body, and spirit, then, making behavioral changes entails looking at both an individual timeline and also a family timeline. And it entails not just looking at timelines of health, but looking at timelines of patterns of behavior and doing those sorts of things. And, what we're aiming to do on the 24th is we want to have a deep dive into something that you can walk away with. So we're going to spend some time doing a medical timeline. We're going to spend some time doing a genogram, so looking at timelines of behaviors and families over generations, get you started on that exercise. And then what we're going to probably do is a guided imagery, or we're thinking this is the guided imagery, one on stories and emotions, and learning how we relate to one specific emotion. Because we have a tendency to label emotions as good or bad, right? Like, if I'm jealous, it's bad. If I'm envious, it's bad. If I'm angry, it's bad. If I'm loving, it's good. If I'm, generous, it's good. But really, emotions are patterns of our behavior, patterns of outward expression that we categorize, but sometimes even the worst of emotions can be a defense, and a necessary defense. If a child is being, mistreated, anger is a completely expected and appropriate emotion for that child to express. It's just the necessity for us long term to not have that emotion remain present or remain limiting in terms of us being stuck like in the limbic system, stuck in our reptilian brain and not getting to use our kind of evaluation to hear the story that we want to write as we rewrite our stories. And, it's kind of what we're aiming to do. As you said a couple minutes ago, what other events are coming up? Well, we're going to be at Harmony Hill on the 11th of June for a 3-day retreat. It's the Harmony Hill Retreat Center in Union, Washington. And if I can type, I think I just put that up. And then we're going to be at Feathered Pipe Ranch. I cannot talk and type at the same time. We're going to be at Feathered Pipe Ranch in Helena, Montana on the 5th of July. And that's a longer program. It's going to go on from Monday evening, the 5th of July, through Saturday morning, basically. The course will end Friday night. So it's 4 full days and an evening, Monday evening, and then the 4 following days. And travel, you'll spend Friday night and travel out on Saturday. But these are going to be deeper dives, kind of answering and looking at these questions about what is our story? How do we rewrite our story? And in the context of that, what's so unique about the functional medicine timeline is the appreciation that you don't wake up one morning with heart disease. It's like, how did you get to heart disease? You don't wake up one morning with diabetes. It's how do you get to diabetes? And, is it obesity that triggers diabetes, or is obesity the first sign that you're pre-diabetic? And, the combination of the two allows for a level of self-knowledge that really we can, recreate who we are so that we have successful change in our lives.
Yeah, they're going to be great opportunities. I think that the one thing that anybody who's listening would, when we think of the timeline, we also bring it back, and it's kind of a good exercise even before. If you join us in the Facebook Live, that's great, on the 24th, or if you come to Harmony Hill or Feathered Pipe. We actually would like your timeline to go back, as it's influenced by what happened while you were in the womb, what happened to your mother, what was happening to your father, the stress levels, how that pregnancy went, your timeline of well-being began then. And then, as you were talking, Joe, what are the stories that influence the limbic system that crank up our response, our sympathetic parasympathetic balance, and how does that influence not only actually our setting of our stress axis in the womb, but how has that influenced the stories that we told ourselves or the experience we had when we were children, and then through our adulthood? And how can you bring change to that, to change the trajectory? How do you remodel that in a way that is most healthful and purpose and ties in with some of the things you may have learned about yourself coming out of COVID? So this is a wonderful opportunity to just spend time learning some different tools and some different things about yourself, and with wonderful folks. So,
I mean,
welcome.
You know, when you come right down to it, behaviors aren't necessarily good or bad. Behaviors are functional. Functional being the one that gets you moving towards what you want to achieve. You know, you can have the best behavior in the world, and if it keeps you from doing the necessary thing right in front of you, it's going to be dysfunctional. You know, stopping to make a protein shake in the morning while the house is on fire before you leave the house is probably a dysfunctional behavior. And unless the shake's big enough that you can pour it on the fire. But, you know, I think that that's part of the wisdom that we hope people walk away from. And the other piece is that, you know, this kind of exploration of who our individual, who is or who you are, this exploration, you know, once we see some sense of who that person is, and once hopefully each of us recognize how special that person inside of us is, that soulful, authentic person within us, we'll see it for others. You know, you and I have, as you said, spent a year now doing these, and they've kind of been our giving back a little bit, just tossing our words out there for anyone to listen to for free. And, you know, being of service, caring, sharing with other people is a huge opportunity to make things different. If you all have liked this today, I've been told that I should be asking people to share our videos and pass them on to their friends and get others to watch. So, you know, apparently I'm not the least bit savvy when it comes to this marketing, but if you guys would like to reshare with some of your groups and those things, that would be helpful to us. And, you know, join us on the 24th. We're going to have a special announcement that day, and a special opportunity will be announced on that day. So, and it'll directly influence perhaps some people's ability to go to Feathered Pipe. So join us on the 24th. And thank you, sir, for a good, fun year.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Joe.